high probability they'll be the ones that solve the crime. They want to finish loose work.
I'm going out doing surveillance, grabbing DNA out, folks.
We sent it to our lab, and then they tested.
DNA is a new field that's advancing rapidly. We've seen a lot of cold cases being solved.
The technology for DNA has come a long way since 1996. There's never been a better time to solve the case than there is today.
We're coming for you, and you'll be found.
Lots of jurisdictions, and we've had a change of leadership in the Boulder Police. Some of the, frankly, boneheads were dismissed, and we've got a new group running the place, and it's very encouraging. Secondly, DNA technology has advanced so much in the last 30 years. Lou Smith, the detective who was brought in by the district attorney early on, legendary detective, solved over 200 homicides in his career, said, John, this case will be solved by DNA. And I think we're at that point now, if we use the technology that's available.
So, John, let's actually play a soundbite of some of that new DNA technology, because there's a key piece of evidence that is yet to be tested. Let's watch it.
The only way that the case can be solved is through DNA testing of all the items of physical evidence. And most importantly, the garrote, which has never been tested, and it's an important item of physical evidence because it was hand-tied by somebody's fingers and then used to strangle JonBenet. That's never been tested for DNA, to my knowledge. I have gotten no assurance that it's going to be done.
A bowl of pineapple, a toy train set, a heavy flashlight left on a kitchen counter. A 9-year-old who once said, "I know what happened." These ordinary objects and a handful of odd words became pillars around which one of America's most persistent cold case narratives formed. If you follow investigative stories and want careful, forensic-minded breakdowns, subscribe now. We'll walk slowly through the evidence, the interviews, and the family choices that shaped what investigators could and could not learn. This piece is meant to be read aloud as a single narrative, with care for facts and clarity when something is disputed. December 25, 1996, a holiday morning turned into a nightmare. On that morning, small details were found that later mattered a great deal. The autopsy recorded undigested pineapple in JonBenét's stomach, indicating she had eaten pineapple shortly before whatever ended her life. A bowl of pineapple on the kitchen table later attracted attention because of reported fingerprints and its unusual presence as a late-night snack in that household. Some reports described those prints as consistent with a child's handling. The toy train set in the basement drew attention because autopsy notes described small, paired abrasions on the body. Some forensic observers saw spacing in those abrasions that aligned with the metal prongs of certain toy train tracks. If those marks were caused by the toy, they placed JonBenet in proximity to that train set. Investigators also found a heavy metal flashlight on a kitchen counter. Its cylindrical shape and weight drew speculation. Could such a flashlight produce the blunt force injury to the skull that examiners noted? But no conclusive fingerprints or DNA on the flashlight tied it to a specific person. Each of these items, pineapple, train set, flashlight, points to proximity. Proximity is not proof. Still, proximity shaped suspicion and the questions investigators asked. A major catalytic moment for public suspicion centered on an enhanced version of the family's 911 recording. Some technicians and online analysts argued the enhanced audio revealed multiple voices, a man saying, "We are not speaking to you," a woman crying out, "Help me, Jesus," and a young male asking, "What did you find?" If that younger voice belonged to the child, that line, "What did you find?" directly contradicted the family's initial claim that he slept through the morning's events. That contradiction fueled public doubt and investigative curiosity. Important caveats apply. Audio enhancement is an interpretive process. Noise, echo, and side tones can create the impression of voices where none exist. Independent experts have disagreed about how reliable the alleged voice identifications are. Some say the voices are distinct and meaningful. Others call them ambiguous and unreliable for making firm conclusions. The 911 tape is therefore powerful and contested. It raised questions that sustained investigation, but it did not, on its own, supply unambiguous proof of who was present or what each person knew. What happened next changed the practical shape of the investigation. The family removed their son from the home. Trusted friends cared for him. Reports say the family used decoy cars and arranged for quiet school drop-offs. The aim, publicly stated, was protection from media and trauma. At the same time, legal counsel negotiated the terms under which the child would speak to police. The first widely reported formal detective interview did not occur until many months later, conducted under controlled conditions. These steps, removal, legal oversight, delayed unscripted interviews, are understandable as efforts to protect a child from trauma and media exploitation. They are also consequential for investigators. In many criminal inquiries, the earliest spontaneous statements from witnesses are invaluable. A child interviewed on the morning of a traumatic event may offer unpolished, unrehearsed responses that illuminate timelines and actions. When the early period passes and interviews occur months later in a planned environment, memory, coaching, and family narratives can shape testimony. Critics argue the family's protective measures limited investigators' access to a potentially crucial witness. Supporters counter that the child's welfare should have been paramount. The practical result is that investigators did not have the sort of early, unscripted testimony they might otherwise have obtained. When interviewers finally spoke with the child, psychologists and detectives looked for patterns. There were moments of specificity, details and odd recollections, and also hedges and qualifiers. I guess, maybe, I don't remember. At age 9, he reportedly said, "I know what happened," then later backtracked and said some details were things an adult had told him. In later public interviews, he described getting up that night to assemble a toy, a detail that contradicts the claim he slept through the night. Experts caution against reading too much into one child's words. Trauma alters memory. Coaching changes responses. The passage of time makes recall unreliable. That said, eating late-night pineapple and playing with toys can explain why two children might have been together in parts of the house investigators once thought were empty. Those facts increase the plausibility of proximity. Patterns of speech, demeanor, and body language are not evidence of criminal action. They are observations used to form hypotheses. Nothing more, nothing less. Observers describe the child's interview demeanor in ways that struck some analysts as odd. A flat effect. Occasional smiles when discussing upsetting topics. A readiness to demonstrate a hypothetical violent action with hand gestures. When a child's emotional expression appears muted, experts consider several possible reasons. One possibility is dissociation. A child overwhelmed by trauma may disconnect emotionally as a protective measure. Another possibility is coaching. Rehearsed narratives can dampen genuine emotion. A third possibility is simply atypical coping. Children show grief differently. None of these explanations proves guilt, and all of them can look similar on camera. Behavioral cues invite interpretation, they do not supply proof. Physical evidence complicates any single explanation. Items like the pineapple bowl and the train track-like abrasions suggest the two children may have been together late that night. If the child's fingerprints appear on the bowl and the abrasions truly match the train prongs, those facts place proximity. At the same time, forensic testing identified DNA on clothing and under fingernails that did not match the family profile. These traces, described in some later testing as a consistent male profile on certain clothing, introduced the possibility of an additional person being involved. This unknown DNA profile led some investigators to step away from theories that centered exclusively on the child. Others raised questions about contamination, transfer, or the limitations of early testing methodologies. Advances in touch DNA techniques and the advent of forensic genealogy have revolutionized cold case work in recent years. They also demand careful chain of custody review and strict scientific controls. The presence of an unknown male profile is a strong piece of evidence that any comprehensive theory must explain. Whether it indicates an intruder, an accomplice, or some form of secondary transfer is an open question that only more testing and careful contextual analysis could resolve. One of the scene's most peculiar artifacts is the long ransom note written on a pad reportedly from the home. The note contains unusual phrasing, specific money demands that echoed known financial facts, and a length and style uncommon for a hurried kidnapper. Handwriting analysts and linguists have debated similarities between the note and the mother's handwriting. Others have noted cinematic phrases that some say point away from a child author. Certain elements in the household, a suitcase placed below a broken basement window, money left untouched, and other scene features, contributed to the appearance of staging. Investigators asked whether the scene aimed to simulate a kidnapping. If staging occurred, motives could include a panicked attempt to create an external explanation or a deliberate effort to misdirect suspicion away from people inside the home. Motives are interpretive. The note itself remains an enigmatic piece that raised more questions about authorship and intent than it answered definitively. Across days and months, the family's choices had cumulative effects. Removing the child limited spontaneous witness access. Inviting friends into the home introduced a risk of contaminating surfaces. Handling the body before fully controlled documentation could have introduced additional DNA or fingerprints. Handing over a notepad from the home, then producing it quickly, shaped the textual record and the public narrative. Each of these actions had plausible non-nefarious explanations, parental panic and the instinct to care for a child, yet each also diminished the pristine evidence that an ideal crime lab would want. Investigators who later attempted to reconstruct the scene faced a patchwork of photos, partial reports, and competing narratives filtered through trauma and media frenzy. The key takeaway is practical. Protection and evidence preservation can conflict. In this case, the collision of those aims left gaps that modern forensic tools might fill, if the chain of custody and available materials permitted. Whatever questions the forensic data raise, the human cost of suspicion is real. The child at the center of these events grew up in the shadow of tabloid headlines, accusatory analysis, and public speculation. Isolation, legal shielding, and media management may have offered some protection, but they also contributed to a narrative in which a child could be simultaneously protected and considered suspect. Discussing the long-term consequences, child welfare experts urge caution. Children who are subject to public suspicion are vulnerable to lifelong stigma. The ethics of investigation requires special care, protecting the child's welfare while preserving the integrity of evidence and the rights of victims. When those obligations clash, the result, as in this case, can be decades of unresolved questions and lives marked by ambiguity. So what remains open, and what could help clarify the record? Some advocates and experts have argued for new testing of certain items with today's methods. They point to a garrote-like device and a paintbrush handle that, they say, deserve modern touch DNA analysis. They urge careful re-examination of chain of custody records for key items such as the pineapple bowl, the flashlight, the clothing, and the ransom pad. They recommend an independent, high-grade audio forensic review of the 911 recordings so voice identifications can be assessed under current scientific standards. They also note that where legal and ethical constraints allow, targeted forensic genealogy could be used to examine unknown male DNA profiles discovered on garments, but only with full legal oversight and protections for privacy. None of these steps guarantees a conclusive answer. Forensic science can narrow possibilities. It rarely offers miraculous certainty, but modern methods applied carefully and transparently could reduce uncertainty. Burke Ramsey remains a complicated figure in a complicated case. His fingerprints, his proximity to a toy train, an alleged voice on a 911 tape, and his interview manner all fed suspicion. But suspicion is not proof. The family's choices to remove and protect him changed what investigators could access in the crucial early hours. That same protection may have preserved a child from immediate trauma, or it may have prevented collection of unscripted information investigators needed. Both realities can be true at once. The responsible posture for viewers and investigators alike is threefold. Demand transparency of documented facts, label conjecture as conjecture, and preserve human dignity. If you have verifiable material that could legitimately assist an investigation, take it to the authorities. Do not publish raw, unverified claims online. The path to truth runs through evidence, careful analysis, and due process, not through speculation or sensationalism. If you found this breakdown helpful, please like and subscribe. We'll follow up with interviews from independent forensic experts and a producer's verification checklist naming documents to request from archives and police records. Above all, when we talk about children in criminal cases, let's keep fairness and rigor at the center. Stay curious. Stay humane.